So thank you for having me, and Alina and Larry and Ahmad. It's a pleasure to share this space with you tonight. I'm going to start with a few poems from my new book, Muddy Dragon on the Road to Heaven. And if you don't mind a little shameless self-promotion, I'm going to post a link in to the chat where if you're interested, you can maybe shop. Actually, before everybody else showed up, we were chatting, and Jennifer mentioned she likes to hike at Valley Forge. So I'm going to read this poem called A Map of Valley Forge, which the event, the hike that I went on took place just about this same time last year. So if that means anything. A Map of Valley Forge. Dug in among mud and farmers' fields, the country licked its wounds, and you can hike along the scars they left. From raised redoubt mounds to the 3-century witness tree bending by General Maxwell's adopted quarters, now a home for wealthy weddings. Past General Wayne's statue, before he became Mad Anthony, who took a beating at Brandywine, then gave it back at Stony Point, earning himself a medal. So when my dog and I topped the Southwest trenches, where recovered cannon pointed toward the patient British, eating Philadelphia like a 3-day leave, while Washington's men battled dysentery and a country too poor to afford a war, I think about how optimistic the settlers here once were. Like even now, when a sunny day in winter brings all the brightly colored joggers out of seasonal depression, a trail map of Valley Forge shows both Mount Joy and Mount Misery, but doesn't tell you where to begin. And if you don't know the area, Mount Joy and Mount Misery are the actual names of the places there. And it's a sunny day today, around the same time of the year. What do you know? A couple of times a year, I take these sort of retreats, camping trips by myself. I go off in the woods to one of the state parks. As I've gotten older, instead of tents, I rent a cabin because I don't want to sleep on the ground anymore. But a number of the poems that I'm going to read were written and sort of take place in places in the woods like that. So this one called Gravity. And a phenomenon you run into sometimes, like in the Poconos, a creek will just disappear as you're hiking along. It goes completely underground and then might come up again, and sometimes they come and go. And that's what this one concerns. Gravity. Sometimes water comes up from the rocks, tumbles a few feet over moss and old chestnut leaves, then disappears again into rocks. If you listen carefully, you can hear it traveling under your feet, a creek that light doesn't touch. And all around you, the forest leans in as if helping to keep that secret. It's good to understand the hidden workings of things, like the heart, how it beats all day long, though you rarely see any blood. Or love, how sometimes it's enough to feel its resistance to change, the way gravity holds together two moving bodies the cosmos wants so badly to pull apart. And this one, Astronomer, I'm pretty sure was written that exact same trip in the cabin a couple years ago. Astronomer. Even if every known constellation has a name, was named by someone who connected its pinpoints and told a story, saw its brightness as light leaking through the cracks in an old cabin, and wanted to tell someone how those stars were lives themselves, that the thousands of stars we see multiply the farther we get from cities. Know that under this November night, The possums guide their dead eyes through the leaves. That surrounded by leafless trees, it's possible to want to name something new, to tell you a story of how the stars look tonight with the moon shattered behind tree branches. That the story these stars make, even if named by someone else, is mine now. Alone by a campfire, the sky the color of burned wood, and far away, a heat so determined to live its mythology that it died on its way to get here. At night, around a campfire, there's not much else to do except either stare at the fire or stare up at the sky, so that's what happens. This is trying to be an optimistic poem called Instead. Instead of regret, what if we called it birds we saw but couldn't name, or name them the sound their wings made echoing off the canyon? Their drumming expanding like circles in water when a stone lands. Instead of fear, what if we called it night, the kind not lit by moon or lantern, just the eyes of the person sleeping next to you opening after a bad dream, then closing into the small, shuffling notions of sheets. Instead of debt, speak about the time it takes to walk from one end of a life to another. How many shoes you'll need, the gravel they pick up, and what the air smells like along the way. Instead of worry, let's call it the words trees make when they talk to the wind, how aspens whisper about birches, and how strong pines in a dense forest will catch weak ones when they fall. But hope and, yes, love, we'll call them what they are. A bag of fresh tomatoes given to a friend, an hour or two of silence with the dying. How the old dog, stiff with pain, still insists on greeting you at the door. So now I'll read some newer poems that hopefully will end up in a next collection. Here's this one's called Pheasant Court. A thinking back on childhood poem. It's been years since I thought about the ring-necked pheasants that came down from the woods and into my yard when I was a boy. My mother woke me one Christmas morning to tell me they were here, their heads and necks shimmering like tree tinsel, their long tail feathers bright as new copper pipes. They waltzed among our frost-covered garden, dipping and strutting over the furrows, then disappeared at the first sight of our young collie, Caesar. My father said the game warden stocked the woods for hunters, and sometimes strays survived, nested in the trees near the dying farmers' fields. His children sold the land for housing tracts, named the new roads after grace that passes so quickly in and out of our lives. Here's an after Christmas poem called Taking Down the Lights, the ritual of taking the Christmas lights down from everything. Because every celebration has to end, lest we get too easy with joy. Because even a string of twinkling bulbs around the house or the tree can't change the cold rain that turns to ice. And even small lights take energy, draw something out of us until we've had enough. Foot by foot, I pull the wires off the eaves, drop the strings onto salted sidewalk and frozen grass. Our shrubbery returns to mere landscaping, letting winter just be winter, not a soft gloss we gaze at for a while, not a story we made up from childhood. Each year feeds into the next like small rivers flowing into larger ones. Days of joy, days of not. Eddies that swirl for a while, then disappear. You've lost people, I've lost people. We take the lights into our hands, pack them away until the darkness calls them back again, when we've almost gotten used to living without them. This one has a weird title. It's called Addendum to the Note on John Keats' Grave Marker. And if you don't know, the note on John Keats' grave marker is, "Here lies one whose name is writ on water." And that's referenced in here. This one, the event took place, probably early spring last year, when my family, we were all kind of huddled up in our homes, quarantine, and we took a little comfort sitting outside around a little campfire, just hanging out and looking at the sky and thinking about the world. All evening, sitting around the small fire, we looked up and talked about Venus, how much she stood out among the other stars, how the night looked blacker, even the pine trees behind us leaning south from decades of hill wind. And as smoke rose above our heads, my daughter, her friend, and myself, our small worries in the small world, chatted a little about the antics of flames, far from the troubles of others, cocooned in our openness like survivors on a life raft while the big ship is sinking. Later that night, another beacon shot across the sky, the space station, 3 men from 2 countries looking down on the little swirls of water around the earth, our names written in its rising and falling, all of us pressed into it together by gravity, everything blending into everything else, disappearing with distance, the one thing we can count on but don't want to. Here's another hiking, being in the woods poem called One Mountain Seen Through the Trees of Another Mountain. And I actually got the title from a picture I took when I was hiking along this ridge, and I took the photo and I posted it on Twitter. And I sort of gave it a caption. I said, it's a picture of one mountain seen through the trees of another mountain. And as soon as I hit send, on Twitter, I go, that's the title of a poem. I sat down with a poem. Maps never show a view like this. Yellow blazes on trees leading to a ridge. The trail so close to the edge, just walking feels like falling. A 4-day trip away from towns or news of the world brings me to moments so great I embrace them. Anthropologists say joy in landscapes is burned into our DNA. A distance, a factor of dreams. Below, the lake is starting to ice over, a cold that's been building for years. And this mountain loop I'm walking could go on too. In the next county, there's a hill called Hope, and here one called Sanctuary. I'm walking down it now to a lake the settlers used to feed their families. Its feeder creek powered an old iron forge also called Hope. So many things named for what we want, or is it what we have? My legs grow sore on the rocky trails I climb to get home. This path, called daybreak, might be the one. And I'm going to end with two dog poems, because if you see, I would pick him up to show that he's stretched out on the floor right now. I don't want to disturb him. But some of you, I see a couple of my students in there, have met Emmett virtually before. This one begins, the title is a line from Shakespeare called, "But since I am a dog, beware my fangs." I love my dog, though he licks his butt. Then he licks my hand or my face or chases his tail until he falls down face to butt and starts all over again. At the dog park, it's nose to butt with every pit bull and beagle, a snarl from the oversized mastiff, and then my dog rolls on his back to expose the place his balls used to be. Open for inspection by the small bully's chihuahua that even the pit bull fears. The other owners in the parking lot nod toward each other as they corral their dogs back into minivans and pickups. Listen, you can hear the whine and huff, the shuffling paws on pavement that divide world from world, tamed and housebroken beast we warm ourselves against at night. You can hear it in the growl that escapes their sleep in front of a fireplace, or the way their bodies melt into the yard while watching a rabbit. You can hear it in the deep parts of their barks, the gears of our engines, the scuff of our boots, the heartbreak, the wolves we all want to be. And this last one is called Blessings of a Dog. And it's mostly about my daughter's new dog who actually, either she or we, I think it's more of a we, got at the end of the summer. Blessings of a Dog. Sadie is the dog's name, in case you need to know. She chases the threadbare tennis ball across the kitchen, dives under a chair, slides to catch it mid-roll, and then trots back bearing the wet gift in her mouth and asks with eyes and paws for me to throw it again. And I do again and again repeat this simple joy until tired, she throws herself onto my lap and gnaws my knuckles. Sometimes I want this forever. The way a perfect fall morning lingers in the scent of walnut trees. All the grief of a summer we carried like water, spilling with each labored step. She's still a pup, has enough play in her for 12 years or so. I know how that goes. You love, they love, everything goes on like it should until it doesn't. She doesn't know there's something broken in the world that a ball can fix, like a bearing that makes the machine run smoother, like the smell of wood smoke in the air that reminds us of childhood innocence, even though something in the distance is burning. And I think I'll end there and thank you all for your attention. I enjoyed this.
So this is called the Citizenship Interview. An order is an order. Yes, I get it. I do not understand. He tells me to raise the voice, mine, to answer loudly, clearly. Yes, I get it. I do no longer understand. An order is yes. An order, so I will leave my passport there for your pair of examining eyes there on the edge of this pressed wood while you do whatever you are now doing. And while you are at it, I'll cross my legs in front of your officer face to show you the sheen of my ceremonial black shoes. Yeah, so this is one of the poems. So the in bitter English, I'll read another from. So it's kind of divided into 4 sections. I read one of each section, and then move on to other things. So this is called The Hunt a Home. And it's a longer poem. It's 3 sections, but I'll read it nevertheless. Number 1. In front of the house, a broken tile, part of the past order. It reminds me of the Egyptian man who owned the place, a hoarder of dark wood, of the black stuff that lodges itself on skin beneath the eye. And what is it about the rusty brown of a broken tile that sums it all? I don't know. I don't remember much of what he had, but all his years in exile were there in that house. And on top of the old tile that I can see now, staring at me, he installed a newer kind, a bright color for time. My brother and I walk his steps, noticing how everything was kept, how everything a cover. How can this man move out of this place? How and where is he going to store all his years? Number 2, the street is being blocked. A car is backing up in the middle of the road. How could they, I look, transport a whole house? In this space, the roots are malleable, and the uprootedness, not really the thing at hand, it is the thing at work. I imagine a tree in place of the house, its roots dangling on pavement, brushing against the cold April winds as the oversized load signs with the flashing cars from the front and back pass the entire block by, and I see windows passing me by, and I look down to where the wheels roll away the whole house. Lo and behold, there are no roots dangling from this wood, only the air making the rounds of a gone by time. And the final section of this poem, number 3. And here again, this is how the story goes. In this country, in these parts of land, it's all about this wood that wants to gather all it's all about this wood that wants to gather all the elements of its end. And long ago, my brother meets the light in his name, in a word, and the light travels fast. Dia keeps running with that name, trying to reflect the flame within himself, his true nature, if you will. But exile catches up with all his steps. He tries to settle and contain himself within a structure of mirrors, but everything freezes with the cold, and the waters in pipes begin expanding beyond their means, and the solid quality of the matter makes copper burst, and then a trickle begins filling walls with whatever liquid escapes this deadening cold. Everything fills, and slowly the abandoned house makes itself at home. All right, but so maybe, so there's a third section. It's called Mother in Between. I'll read one of the poems from Recycling. I'm into these very long poems, and this poem is called Waste. It's about my mother. In your world, nothing went to waste. Nothing in your world. And joking once, I said to my American friend, my mother, in her world, nothing went to waste. You, the world's best recycler, laughing, how so? But nothing went to waste. Your hands setting things aside for wild cats, saving bread for birds, and the chickens in the backyard ate everything you said. And the skin, gentle hands getting coarse, picking out zucchini hearts, setting them aside on stove, the heat underneath cooking, water coming out of faucet, saved by the pot for plants. In your world, one kind, only one pair of shoes you clung to. Here, I'll read another one from this poem. It's actually one of the previous sections called Compost. And it's also remembering my mother. Every scrap of food had to go in whole. Every bit of food, the ground, the earth, dirt, and stone. You asked me to dig a hole in the ground for your composting. Down a few steps, I am slashing through air, raising the pick and landing it, earth collapsing, dirt and stone pushed in for the turn and the cut widening, and I, hearing the water bubbling underneath vision, this pot, this boil, and no matter what, no vinegar can stop these beads from bleeding. Yeah, so a lot of poems about my mother here. You know, so there's this final section. It's called A Dirty Underworld. And in this, there's another poem about my mother. I'll end reading from Bitter English with this one. It's called At the Post Office. It's rather a long narrative poem, but I want to try to read it. I never read this poem, so I'll give it a chance. At the post office. What was I mailing that day? Nothing of importance, just bills. I had a few of them, not all of them were without stamps. I stood in line eyeing the surroundings. Some services were relabeled. They are no longer what they were called. And what inspired the change, I don't know, but I cared to know. Maybe an attempt at clarification, a desire to eliminate confusion. The more the relabeling will eliminate, the more smoothly things go at that window up there. Wishful thinking, one might say, and I'd say it's child's play. Let them do whatever keeps them busy, as I'm still standing in line, marveling with red eyes at the priority packages. Some of them go by weight, some go by shape. You fit it, we ship it, one label says. I imagine hands trying to fit some malleable thing into a box, the edges of that thing always sticking out, and the hands hurry to control that corner while another one goes up, and so on and so forth, till I try hard controlling my imagination as I'm still standing, getting a bit nervous for no particular reason. And of course, you can't tell the mind what to do, and the thing turns into an octopus in my bag. And I see myself going a bit mad, trying to get its many legs in there, in that box. Oh my God, when is this going to end? The person in front of me wants to mail a package to China. He asks, where? On the package, where? Should he write in his language? A heated discussion begins to warm up in my ear, but none of it actually takes place. The lady points to one corner and simply says, here. And to top it off, she tells the man not to get back in line. When you're done, just come up right up. And I get called from behind, it's your turn. That is, stop staring at things like a good little boy, and let's move this experience a foot and some inches ahead. I go up myself. I look at the lady behind the transparent plastic separating us. She looks a bit of a blur to me. Her voice seeps from the cracks, from the holes in fake glass, asking me, what can I do for you? And I wasn't myself then. I looked at her blankly and said, almost shouting, stamps! She looked at me without much surprise, as though it was expected of me to shout. It's all thought, all of it in my head, these scenarios. The lady kindly pointed to booklets of stamps. Some food for thought, I said, pointing to a set with Spanish words, labeling various Mexican meals. And she found what I said funny. She really smiled. There was a set of purple hearts, another with the American flag, and there, that one I've been trying to avoid, a picture of an old woman, a hand being reached to her from behind, touching the shoulder. I really couldn't believe it. The label, Alzheimer's, written over in big white letters. I hesitated. I took only the Mexican food one. That's it, the nice lady said, as though nothing was. And I said, I'll take one of those two, the Alzheimer's set. And I stuck them in my bag, then picked up my daughter from school, and I almost forgot. But then I remembered, and I said to her, all in Arabic, of course, let me show you some stamps. And when seeing the stamp, she couldn't believe it herself. That's Grandma, she said, ripping the booklet in half. She wanted to keep her half, to my surprise. And when it was time to say goodbye and good night, as I was going to New York, she said, wait. She got out of bed, her usual trick of not going to sleep, I thought. She said, I want to give you something. She went to her closet of toys, got the booklet out of a drawer of dolls, and was having trouble pulling one of the stamps out. I reached to help, but it was unnecessary. She did it herself, ripped part of the woman's hair off too, though not too much, just a little off the top of it, and was sticking it on a piece of paper. I was about to thank her, but the operation wasn't done, I guess. She said, wait, again, and went to some picture on the wall and started ripping something else. And I was about to get irritated, raised my voice a bit, but she didn't care. She said, just wait, and went right to it. A little heart was being ripped off the wall. She stuck it on the back of the same paper with the stamp and handed me something I wasn't sure how to take. So we'll leave it at that for bitter English, and move on to to more bitter subjects. No, let's lighten the mood a bit. I've been trying to put together another collection, and it's kind of a collection that might be called Tables and Chairs, because there's a lot of reflection in this new collection on the relationship between tables and chairs. And I think I read that particular poem in one of the last readings at Fergie's, or my last reading at Fergie's. So I'll read some of these chair poems, or table chair poems, and maybe others. I don't know. Do I have another like 10 minutes or less, or?
I have not been tracking time.
Okay, well.
Let's say yes.
Okay.
Yes, go for it.
All right, so this is called The Disappearance of Chairs. And that's how it goes. Chalky steps, chair hugging chair, not long ago, all was well, and then one on top of the other, they've been stacked. Tables all smothered by stiff legs and some hard flat bellies, and not much more happened after that. Everyone remained where they've been placed. A strange arrangement has just taken place. Without the sitters, they felt themselves kings for once, on top of the world, so to speak. And that was that for a while, till they began feeling an itch for what used to be, for old times, when they were murdered every day and people sat there to witness. So, yeah, that poem was that poem. So I'll read another one. It's called Christos. Jesus, a prophet or a god, because in the shop he made, as every carpenter of the time, tables and chairs. Out of wood came the word, as the original impulse was to hide behind an act. One can't be a prophet or a god without a cover, something to do till the word gets around, so to speak. And as metal was not a thing for laymen to play around with, it had to be wood, the only dry thing that could catch fire and lead, like the word, peoples, animals, and angels, of course, towards the light. That's it. And then sometimes, you know, these like reflections on tables and chairs came couch in the form of poems about other things. I'm going to read this poem called Letters to Emily D. And there was a period of time when I discovered Emily Dickinson. And I was reading, I was just taking her collected works and just kind of opening things, opening the book randomly. And trying to find like one line, one of her striking lines, and then try to kind of write to it. And I did that for a while. And after I did that for a while, I wrote this poem. The sign shakes. They've murdered the table today. And as they are, those talking heads, experts in the act, they now set up more tables and chairs. Here is an empty envelope that I fetched to imitate your loneliness. Nothing of the real satisfies. A sight of the flesh sends the mind wandering. Scribble away, you say. I say, between lines, other words and names are born. As numbers appear to remind us, as always, of loneliness. A letter should be inside an envelope. A letter hides like the self that swirls to appease the body. Oh my, feet, oh my, what can be held by flatness can be tossed away. 1, 2, like leaves we do, hide triangles. All right, I'll continue with this poem. It's not over. It's like it's kind of sectioned in a weird way. It's like sectioned in a way where it's not numbered. So I'll try to continue with it. The limbs grow out of a pocket. The lines grow. Unlike you, my words are not sparse. I am the flood that sustains by destruction. We are the waters dragged out of the depths by moons. If you open up the tongue, there's the mouth that is the gap, ready to eat up all inclinations. Is it for sustenance that we gobble up the word? Lips stick as the tongue wets, pricks an opening, silence. Wet it seeps into the mouth, ordering the tongue to tame the one that folds onto itself all other numbers. And then the final section, which is basically 3 short lines. Yes, out of the one grows the wing. All right, so let me read another poem that doesn't have to do with chairs, but maybe things. And it's called Some Things Last. These windows, these panes at the beginning of light, looking where they look, eyeing the east and the rust. And here they are, protected by shade and shadows. Branches and birds run into them, fly into them and out. You can see nothing through. You can see, or you can only see what bounces off. Back at the world, and then you return to the lemon that is the self squeezing drop after drop. There's nothing left of you now, no juice. Can you go on lubricating the mind with filth, musing on you as disaster, and the rest of you as the elements? Can you? Here they go, one by one, into a flame set down beneath all the steps. At the very bottom of it all you say, and God, I wish you didn't. I look away from the blank space remaining. Oh, these birds in the mornings are funny, and the little tricks they repeat and repeat, like these sounds they make in order. They fly off together and one by one, puffing up small bodies, extending a peak that opens up a view, that finds space in whatever looks shut and closed. A wall has some hole, a tree trunk can manage a crack, and under the ledge, a window knows something of the hidden world. Okay, maybe I'll try to read just two more poems, and then we'll call it a night. If only I could find these two more poems. All right, here's one that is just called a poem. If beginnings are as hard as they seem, then let this loose attempt at filling emptiness be on its own an end, a page on its own, like a poem on its own, a solitary step toward the great void. Line by line it says, there's no need. This once in a life gesture toward freezing the moment in the moment can only be the sum of all wasted time, the ebb and flow of the truism of cliches, and the desire, the human one, to reduce life from repetition, to rescue life from repetition. Like a sad string, it cannot be sad on its own. We have to label it so and live with the fallacies of naming. And here I'll end on another Tables and Chairs poem. It's called Closer to the Real Thing. Things in moderation, our only consolation. A table is good and loving when the head sinks by the force of gravity down for a doze. Things in moderation, the closest we can get to a soft spirituality, not the one you breathe in and out, but the one you hold in your hand and feel with the skin of your fingers, the one you can ponder with touch, our only consolation.